Audiobook by Fate's Reader. Don't forget to subscribe and like the channel for more epic series. Drop your recommended novel in comments below. We love to know what you want to hear next.
Chapter 1. Don't go outside when it's dark. Don't go outside when it's dark. This phrase had been circulating through disabled elderly village for years, but exactly when it started doing so was never figured out. In spite of that, the truth of this phrase was never in doubt. In disabled elderly village, Granny C started getting anxious as she watches the setting sun slowly hide behind the mountains. As the sun set, the last of its rays disappeared, suddenly leaving the entire world in absolute silence. No sound could be heard. The only thing that could be seen was the darkness that slowly approached from the west, swallowing every mountain, river, and tree in its path before finally arriving at disabled elderly village and engulfing it. For ancient stone statues had been erected at the four corners of disabled elderly village. These statues were so old and modeled that even Granny C didn't know who sculpted them or when they had been constructed there. As darkness fell, the four statues emitted a faint glow in the darkness. Seeing the statues light up as usual, Granny C and the rest of the elderly in the village let out sighs of relief. The darkness outside began growing thicker and thicker, but with the light of the statues, disabled elderly village was still considered safe. Suddenly, Granny C's ears twitched as she let out a cry of astonishment. "Everyone, listen! A child is crying outside." Beside her, Old Ma shook his head and replied, "Impossible. You must be hearing things." There really is a baby crying. Except for Deaf, the rest of the elderly looked at one another upon hearing the cries of a baby echo through the darkness from outside the village. How could a baby appear nearby when disabled elderly village was located in such a remote area? "I'll go take a look." Granny C grew excited as she tiptoed, then ran to the side of one of the statues in the village. Old Ma immediately hurried over as well. "Have you gone mad, old woman C? Leaving the village when it's dark means death. The things in the dark are afraid of the stone statue. I won't die so quickly if I carry this statue out of the village." Granny C bent over as she attempted to carry the stone statue. However, since she was a hunchback, she was unable to carry it on her back. Old Ma shook his head. "Let me do it. I'll help you carry the statue." Another elderly person to the side walked over with a limp and said, "Old Ma, you won't be able to carry that stone statue for long with just that remaining arm of yours. With both my arms intact, it'll be better to let me do it." Old Ma just stared at him. "Can you still walk with your lame leg, damned cripple? I may only have one arm left, but there's more than enough strength in it." He stabilized his footing as he carried the impossibly heavy stone statue with his only arm. "Old woman C, let's go. Stop calling me damned old woman asterisk. Cripple, mute, and the rest be extra vigilant. Since the village will be short one stone statue, be sure not to let the things in the darkness slip in." As Old Ma and Granny C walked out of disabled elderly village, strange and unknown things floated through the darkness around them. However, as the stone statue shone with rays of light, all of them screeched strangely and retreated back into the darkness. After following the baby's cries for a few hundred steps, Old Ma and Granny C moved forward and arrived at a huge river bank. This was where the baby's cries were coming from. The faint glow from the stone statue did not reach far enough, so both of them had to intently listen to the direction that the sound came from, moving upstream. After dozens of steps, the cry could be heard nearby. At the same time, Old Ma's only arm had nearly reached its limit. Granny C used her bright eyes and spotted a small fluorescent glow in the distance. The glow came from a basket which had stopped at the river bank. It was also where the cries had been coming from. It really was a child. Granny C moved forward to pick the basket up, but she was startled upon realizing she couldn't. Under the basket was a pair of pale white hands, had become bloated by the river water. These hands were propping up the basket and the child inside of it, pushing them all the way to the river bed. "Don't worry. The child is safe now," Granny gently said to the woman under the water. As if the female corpse heard her words, her hands loosened their grasp. She disappeared into the darkness as she got swept away by the river. Granny C lifted the basket up, and inside of it was a baby swaddled in cloth. A jade pendant that gave off a fluorescent glow rested atop the clothing. Both the glow of the jade pendant and the glow of the stone statue were very similar, but the glow of the jade pendant was much weaker. It was this jade, since the glow of the jade pendant was weak, it was only able to protect the child and not the woman. It's a boy. Returning to disabled elderly village, all the villagers that gathered were old, weak, sick, and disabled. Granny C peeled away the swaddling cloth to take a look at the baby, and the remnants of her withered, scattered teeth broke out into a grin. There is finally a healthy person in our disabled elderly village. Cripple, who only had one leg remaining, surprisingly asked, "Are you planning on raising him, old woman C? We can't even take care of ourselves. I think we should give him away." Granny C erupted in anger. "I, an old woman, retrieved this child with my own strength. Why must I give him away?" The group of villagers became submissive and did not dare to oppose her. Carried on a stretcher, the village chief came over. He was slightly worse than the rest of the elderly. At least the others had limbs, even if they were lesser than those of a normal human. He, on the other hand, had no limbs at all. However, everyone was very respectful of him. Even the fiend-like Granny C did not dare to be impudent. "Since we're going to raise him, should we give him a name?" she asked. Village chief replied, "Old woman, do you see anything else in the basket?" Granny C went through the basket and shook her head. "There isn't anything in here other than this jade pendant. The word Qin is on the pendant. The jade does not have any impurities, and it also has a strange power. It definitely isn't an ordinary object. Could it be from a rich family? Should he be called Qin? Or should his surname be Qin?" Village chief gave the question some thought before saying, "Let his surname be Qin, and let his name be Mu. Qin Mu. Once he grows up, let him be a herder. That should be enough for him to survive at least. Qin Mu." Granny C looked at the swaddled baby who wasn't afraid of her and was unexpectedly giggling without a care. The sound of a flute echoed across the river bank. A herder boy sat on a cow, playing a melodious tune on his flute. The herder boy looked to be 11 to 12 years of age, and he had delicate features, such as his red lips and white teeth. With his shirt half open, a jade pendant dangled in front of his chest. This young boy was indeed the baby that Granny C had picked up from the river bank 11 years ago. The elderly in the village had painstakingly raised the boy over the years. Granny C had found a cow so that, when Qin Mu was still a baby, he could have milk every day and live through the period in which babies would die young. However, no one knew where she got it from. Even though the villagers of disabled elderly village were all fiendish, all of them were very nice to Qin Mu. Granny C was a tailor, and during most days, Qin Mu would learn how to tailor from Granny C, how to gather and refine herbs from the apothecary, how to use leg skills from Grandpa Cripple, how to use echolocation from Grandpa Blind, and how to properly breathe and exhale from the limbless village chief. As a result, each day went by quickly. The cow had been his wet nurse since he was a baby. Granny C had planned to sell her away, but Qin Mu was reluctant. Therefore, the job of herding cows was left to him. Qin Mu frequently herded cows by the river bank, content with the green mountains and bluish-white clouds. Qin Mu, save me." Suddenly, the cow Qin Mu was sitting on started to speak, greatly shocking him before he jumped down from its back. He could only see the cow's eyes welling up with tears, and in a human tongue, it said, "Qin Mu, you have consumed my milk since you were a baby. I can partially be considered your mother, so you need to save me." Qin Mu blinked, then asked, "How do I save you?" The cow said, "There's a sickle at your waist. Cut away my skin and you can save me from being trapped." Qin Mu hesitated. "Have you forgotten the grace in which I nurtured you?" the cow asked. Qin Mu raised his sickle and carefully cut the cow's skin. It was strange, but when the cow skin had been peeled away, not a single drop of blood flowed out. In addition to that, the inside of the cowskin was unexpectedly empty. No flesh or bone could be seen. Halfway through peeling the skin from the cow, a woman who appeared to be 20 to 30 years old rolled out. both legs still wrapped in those of the cow. Her skin and the cow's skin were connected, but her upper body had already been separated from the cow's skin. With her disheveled hair, the woman grabbed the sickle from the hands of the flabbergasted Qin Mu and cut the cowskin from her legs in 2 to 3 moves. Her courage turned into evil as she looked at Qin Mu and pointed the sickle at him, laughing coldly. "Vile little creature, I was turned into a cow because of you, and for 11 years, I could only eat grass and even had to feed you milk. I had just given birth to my poor child before tea." Qin Mu was dumbfounded and had no idea what the lady from the cowskin was talking about. Just as the lady was about to slice him to death, she suddenly felt a chill from the center of her back. She looked down and saw the blade of a knife jutting out from her chest. "Mu'er, your grandpa apothecary wants you to go home for your medicines." The corpse of the lady collapsed to the floor. Behind her, pleasantly smiling at Qin Mu and holding a knife that dripped blood, was Grandpa Cripple from the village. Grandpa Cripple! Qin Mu's body went limp as he looked at the cowskin and the lady's corpse in a daze. "Go on back now." Cripple patted him on the shoulder and chuckled. As Qin Mu stumbled back to the village, he turned back to look and saw Cripple throwing the lady's corpse into the river. The impact of this scene was so great to him that he didn't even realize when he'd returned to the village. "Qin Mu! Damned brat! What did I tell you? Don't go outside when it's dark." As night fell, the stone statues at the 4 corners of disabled elderly village automatically began to light up again. Granny C stopped Qin Mu, who was planning to sneak out of the village to check on the cowskin, and dragged him back. "Granny, why can't we go out when the sky goes dark?" Qin Mu asked, raising his head. "When the sky goes dark, some scary things will move around in the darkness. Going outside means certain death," Granny C solemnly said. "The stone statues in the village protect us, and the things in the darkness dare not enter the village." "Do the other villages have stone statues like this too?" Qin Mu asked out of curiosity. Granny C nodded her head. However, she kept looking outside of the village with a worried expression, mumbling to herself, "Cripple should be back soon. I really shouldn't have let Cripple go out. He only has 1 leg remaining. Granny, something weird happened today." Qin Mu hesitated for a moment before telling Granny C about the woman that emerged from the cow's stomach. Granny C nonchalantly replied, "Are you talking about that woman? Cripple told me about that. He settled it properly. When you were weaned at 4 years old, I wanted to sell the cow away, but you didn't want me to. In the end, I let you care for it. You see what happened? I said you would definitely develop feelings for the cow if you drank its milk until you were 4 years old." Qin Mu blushed. 4 years of age was definitely too late to wean a child off of milk, but that wasn't the important thing here, right? Grandpa Cripple killed that lady. It was a good kill." Granny C laughed. "She made a bargain. She would have died 11 years ago. If it weren't for our need to nurse you, could she have lived up to today?" Qin Mu didn't know what she was talking about. Granny C glanced at him and said, "That woman was the wife of the Lord of Border Dragon City, which is located thousands of miles away. Border Dragon City Lord is lecherous, and that woman got jealous easily. The Border Dragon City Lord loves to go out womanizing and kidnapping maidens from respectable families. Every single time the Border Dragon City Lord defiled the purity of a maiden, his wife would send her men to beat that maiden to death. I originally snuck into Border Dragon City planning to assassinate her. But when I saw that she had just given birth to a child that was only 3 months old and saw that she had the milk you needed, I turned her into a cow. I didn't think that this woman would actually manage to break free from the seal, speak, and nearly harm you." Utterly amazed, Qin Mu cried out, "Granny, how do you turn a human into a cow?" Granny C chuckled, revealing her withered teeth. "You want to learn? I'll teach you." "Oh, Cripple is back." Qin Mu looked over and saw Cripple limping back, gripping a crutch with one hand and carrying a beast over his back with another. Darkness came flooding toward the village like raging tide, causing Granny C worriedly shout, "Move faster! Damned Cripple! Faster! What's the rush?" Cripple continued walking toward the village at a steady pace, and at the exact moment he entered the village, the thick darkness flooded over the entire village. The beast on his back, a fierce, multicolored tiger, was still alive. The darkness brushed against its tail, and it suddenly howled in pain. Qin Mu rushed behind it to take a look and saw that the only thing left of the tiger's tail was bone. All of the tail's skin, fur, and flesh had disappeared as if something had chewed everything off. Qin Mu gazed into the darkness outside the village, curiosity piqued, unable to see anything in the pitch black. What is it that exists within the darkness? He thought. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 2. The Blood of the Four Spirits. Granny C smiled as she excitedly pulled Qin Mu into the village. Stop looking out there and come here. Quickly. Today is your big day. Village Chief, Old Ma, everyone, get out here. A bonfire illuminated the village. As Village Chief was once again carried out on a stretcher, he solemnly asked, "Have the four spirits been found?" "They've all been found." One-armed Old Ma dragged out a huge jade-green snake that was dozens of yards long. The snake reeked of blood, but it was still alive. In spite of that, it couldn't move under Old Ma's one-handed grip. At the same time, Mute the blacksmith came over carrying a huge bird that was slightly bigger than him. Both of the bird's wings and legs were bound, and whenever it tried to struggle, sparks bounced from its feathers. The crackling noises that its struggling created were terrifying. Blind then carried out a giant tortoise that was much larger than a table. Only God knew how long this giant tortoise had lived, for even its shell had turned golden with age. All four limbs of the beast were hidden inside of its shell. A claw would sneakily stretch out from time to time, and one instance in which it did, Qin Mu saw steam coming from the bottom of it. The steam looked as if it were strong enough to lift the golden tortoise up and help it escape. The only reason the tortoise was unable to do so was the fact that Blind had a hook piercing its nose. The green dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise. Even though we haven't been able to find the blood of these four spirits, we can still refine some by using the green dragon snake, the iron bone tiger, the lightning bird, and the golden tortoise as replacements. They will be enough. Village Chief gave the village's resident butcher a nod. Butcher grinned and used his hands and arms to move forward. He was a man who only had the upper half of his body left. Every part below his waist had been cleanly chopped off. 4 vats had been placed in front of the green dragon snake, iron bone tiger, lightning bird, and golden tortoise. Slicing into each of them a single time, Butcher let out the blood of these ferocious beasts. Soon enough, the fresh blood of these 4 beasts ran dry. "Apothecary," Village Chief called out. The village's apothecary stepped forward. He had no face. His nose, the skin on his face, and half of his lips seemed to have been sliced off by someone. He was the ugliest, scariest person in the village, but Qin Mu felt that Grandpa Apothecary was the nicest. Apothecary stepped forward and took out 4 peculiar red leaves. On each leaf was a snow-white insect egg. Apothecary dropped a leaf into every vat. In each one, a larva could be seen hatching from its egg, coming to rest on the leaf and drinking the blood. The more blood these larvae drank, the bigger their bodies became. The blood in all 4 vats quickly disappeared, leaving behind a big fat worm in all 4 vats. Apothecary scattered some white, crystalline foam that resembled salt into each vat, and Qin Mu could actually see the 4 worms rapidly shrink. The sight made him click his tongue in wonder. A moment later, Apothecary picked the 4 worms up. Each of the worms was only the size of a person's palm. Taking out 4 white porcelain cups, he tightly squeezed one of the worms, causing it to squeak loudly. Crystal clear amber blood flowed from its mouth, filling up a cup. Doing the same thing to the other 3 bugs, Apothecary squeezed the blood from each one's stomach into the remaining cups, then placed all 4 in front of Qin Mu while shaking his head. Only this much spirit blood could be refined. They aren't the real spirit beasts after all. Muir, there are 7 great treasure vaults in the human body. Spirit embryo, 5 elements, 6 directions, 7 stars, celestial being, life and death, and divine bridge. These 7 great treasure vaults are inherently sealed, just like hidden treasures that are locked away. As a result, they are referred to as the 7 Great Divine Treasures. The 7 Great Divine Treasures are normally sealed and require a warrior to unseal it themselves, village chief said. His aura was intimidating as the light of the bonfire's blaze flickered across his face. Walls are what stand in the way of a warrior trying to awaken their divine treasures. There is one for each treasure. The Spirit Embryo Wall, the 5 Elements Wall, the 6 Directions Wall, the 7 Stars Wall, the Celestial Being Wall, the Life and Death Wall, and the Divine Bridge Wall. The process of breaking through these 7 walls is called wall break. Grandpa Ma gently caressed Qin Mu's head with his remaining hand and smiled. It is impossible for a person to cultivate if a wall can't be broken. Some people are blessed by the heavens. When such a person is born, their spirit embryo wall will have already been broken, naturally unsealing their spirit embryo divine treasure. This kind of constitution is called a spirit body, gifted by the heavens as the perfect seedling for cultivation. People with a spirit body have talent superior to that of normal people, allowing them to cultivate twice as fast. There are 4 elements for spirit embryo, which means that there are also 4 kinds of spirit bodies. The green dragon spirit body, the white tiger spirit body, the vermilion bird spirit body, and the black tortoise spirit body. The blood of these 4 spirits is needed in order to check if one possesses a spirit body. If you possess a green dragon spirit body, you will awaken the chi of the green dragon after drinking green dragon spirit blood, just like Old Ma, apothecary said. One-armed Old Ma unbuttoned his shirt and took it off, standing topless in front of Qin Mu. He turned his back to Qin Mu before unleashing a deep shout. Qin Mu immediately saw a green chi emerge from Old Ma's back. From his tailbone to the back of his head, the green chi slowly formed a green dragon. As the scales, beard, and hair of the dragon appeared, a dragon claw extended Old Ma's only arm while another 2 dragon claws coiled around his legs. This is a green dragon spirit body. One-armed Old Ma put his shirt back on. Old Woman C has a white tiger spirit body. Granny C rolled her eyes and said, I won't take off my clothes and let you old dogs take advantage of me. I shall show Qin Mu by shaping my chi. Granny C's body shook slightly as the indistinct figure of a ferocious white tiger appeared behind her, a faint bestial roar resonating from it. Everyone in the village has a spirit body. Back in the day, we were glorious. Now, however, we're all just a bunch of old, disabled elderly. Granny C smiled. There's nothing that we, the disabled elderly, can give you. These 4 cups of blood from 4 different spirits are the key to awakening a spirit body. Like with a green dragon spirit body, if you have a white tiger spirit body, drinking white tiger spirit blood would awaken the chi of the white tiger within your spirit embryo. If you have a vermilion bird spirit body, vermilion bird spirit blood would awaken the chi of the vermilion bird within your spirit embryo. The same goes for a black tortoise spirit body. Now drink. Village chief, Granny C, and everyone else looked at Qin Mu, revealing expressions of anticipation. Qin Mu's heart pumped wildly. Even though he had drunk countless strange concoctions while learning how to gather and refine herbs from apothecary, it had never been this strange. Qin Mu lifted one of the porcelain cups. Since the cup held vermilion bird spirit blood, the sanguine liquid was blistering hot. He drank all of it in one shot and felt a burning sensation spread from his throat to his limbs and then his bones. He felt a raging blaze inside of his body, one that was so hot his blood seemed to be boiling. After a moment, the burning feeling faded. Mute. Does he have a vermilion bird spirit body? Village chief asked. Mute the blacksmith shook his head. Continue, Qin Mu, village chief said. Qin Mu took the second white porcelain cup that contained white tiger spirit blood. Drinking it felt like drinking molten iron-filled slag, tasted like copper, and stung his mouth. He felt that same stinging sensation throughout his body, which then faded soon after. He doesn't have a white tiger spirit body. Granny C shook her head in slight disappointment. Qin Mu, the third cup, village chief said solemnly. Qin Mu drank from the third cup. It contained green dragon spirit blood that had been refined from the huge green snake. This cup of spirit blood made him feel as if the blood in his muscles had begun to swell, uncomfortably squeezing his organs. However, this bloated feeling quickly faded as well. Old Ma shook his head with a disappointed look on his face. He doesn't have a green dragon spirit body. In that case, he must have a black tortoise spirit body. Apothecary revealed a rare smile, looking even more sinister than usual. Qin Mu drank the last cup that was full of black tortoise spirit blood. His body became as light as a feather as he drank it. It was like he was immersed in the water of a river. However, like before, the feeling quickly vanished. He doesn't have a black tortoise spirit body. Apothecary shook his head. The villagers around the bonfire became silent. Then Butcher said, "If that's the case, he's just an ordinary human." Granny C suddenly began to cry, struggling to speak. "All of us are old and disabled. Qin Mu won't be able to continue living if we die. It's so dangerous here. He wouldn't survive for even a day." Qin Mu grabbed Granny C's hand and gently said, "Don't cry, Granny. You and all the grandpas are good people. Nobody will die." "Good people?" Hee hee. Old Ma laughed at himself. "We were all forced to retreat to the great ruins, struggling to live at death's doorstep. The great ruins are too dangerous, so it'll definitely be difficult for Moore to survive without us. We should send him out of the great ruins where it's much safer. We will be discovered and killed if we send him out. Since he is associated with us, he would die as well," Butcher said coldly. Disabled elderly village went silent once again. Suddenly, village chief spoke. "Good." Confused, Granny C asked, "What's good about this?" Village chief smiled. "I'm referring to his constitution. It's a great seedling." Butcher, Apothecary, and the rest of the villagers gave him blank stares, unable to understand why Qin Mu's constitution was great. Village chief smiled and explained, "My guess is that Moore has another type of constitution, one that combines the strengths of the four great constitutions, an overlord body." "An overlord body?" Granny C and the rest wore skeptical looks. All of them were experienced, knowledgeable people, but they had never heard of an overlord body before. "Yes, an overlord body." Village chief grinned. "It's difficult for normal spirit blood to awaken an overlord body. Blood from the four great spirit beasts must be collected for the overlord body to show itself. None of the four great spirit beasts remain in the great ruins, but it shouldn't be too hard to find their descendants. Continue capturing beasts and refining their blood. Once Qin Mu drinks enough spirit blood, his overlord body will awaken naturally." Everyone trusted village chief, so all of the disabled elderly in the village were overjoyed to hear him say all of this. "Tomorrow I'll go with Cripple to catch a tiger. Rest early, Moore. You'll still have to drink more spirit blood tomorrow." Once everyone dispersed, Apothecary and Mute brought village chief back to his room. After Mute left, Apothecary remained in the room and softly said, "The overlord body doesn't exist." Village chief nodded. "I said that without thinking. However, if I hadn't said anything, it would have been hard for everyone else to continue living." Apothecary was at a loss for words. Everyone in disabled elderly village had their own history, but they were all forced to move to the great ruins. Struggling to survive, all of their sorrows weighed heavily upon them. Qin Mu was partially the reason why everyone could continue living up to this point. It was the appearance of this healthy little baby that had cleansed the sorrow from everyone's hearts. As they raised Qin Mu, they began to view this little boy as their most precious family member. It was Qin Mu that held the fragile hearts of the people in disabled elderly village together. If the villagers knew that Qin Mu only had an ordinary body and wouldn't be able to survive in the great ruins by himself, all of them might actually lose control and do the unthinkable. Apothecary was expressionless. "You can't hide the truth from them forever. All of us will die of old age someday and leave Qin Mu behind. That's why we'll never tell him that the overlord body doesn't exist. Keep it a secret from him for eternity," village chief said solemnly. "Let him believe that he has the one and only overlord body." Apothecary was stunned as he examined village chief's face. Under the dim light from the oil lamp, village chief's face seemed to be particularly bewitching as he smiled. "I want to see if an ordinary person with unparalleled faith can achieve something that even we, people with spirit bodies can't. Apothecary gave him a blank stare. Mortal body? To overlord body? Village chief nodded deeply. As long as there's faith, a mortal body will become an overlord body. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 3, Divine Arts. Apothecary had his own way of doing things. Make Qin Mu drink as much spirit blood as possible. Drown him in it if need be. Even if his spirit body doesn't awaken, his physical body will get stronger every time he drinks spirit blood. His physical body will become much more powerful than any spirit body. He'll be able to kill a dragon with one punch. Village chief laughed. Such a thing would definitely terrify those bastards outside the great ruins. Both of them looked at each other with glee. Then Apothecary walked out of the room and closed the door. The next day, the villagers managed to get a hold of a few more iron bone tigers, green dragon snakes, lightning birds, and golden tortoises. With a goal to strive for, all of them were eager to work. Apothecary, however, got angry. Qin Mu will drown if he drinks so much spirit blood in one go. Mute the blacksmith dragged 2 lightning birds over and laughed mischievously, revealing his tongueless mouth. Muer can endure it. Granny C had faith in Qin Mu, yet Apothecary just stared at them and went silent. He took out the larvae and carried on refining the blood, but things still went wrong. The amount of spirit blood was too much for Qin Mu, causing his body to inflate as if he were filling with air. All of the elderly villagers became extremely nervous, worried that Qin Mu would explode with a bang. Apothecary took out a few hollow silver needles, stabbing them into Qin Mu's back and the top of his head. Red, blue, and purple gases spewed from the holes in the protruding end of each needle. After some time, the stream of gas from each needle stemmed and stopped. Apothecary then removed each needle and glared at the others. Take things at a steady pace, step by step. All of you trying to force-feed him as if he were a glutton will just kill him. He's unbearably bloated right now, so all of you make yourselves busy. To help him digest the spirit blood, he'll be training his knife skills with Butcher, his fists with Old Ma, and his legs with Cripple. Muer, it's time for some knife training. Butcher shoved both his hands against the ground, actually launching himself into the air and landing on a nearby pile of wood. Since he didn't have a lower body, the combined height of the pile of wood and his upper body allowed him to match Qin Mu. Butcher held a pair of pig slaughtering knives in both his hands, but these knives were different from the norm. Normal pig slaughtering knives had blades that were curved into a crescent moon and were no more than a foot long. In addition to that, they had circular wooden handles. On the other hand, Butcher's pig slaughtering knives had a similar design, yet were significantly larger. The blade of each knife stretched out to a yard in length. The backs of the blades were thick while the edges were very thin, and both sparkled with a polished sheen. Side by side, both knives were terrifyingly huge and resembled an arched doorway. Although he only had one, Qin Mu's pig slaughtering knife was the same size as Butcher's. It was extremely heavy, weighing over 10 kilograms. Qin Mu would usually be able to just barely lift that single knife, but after consuming the blood of the 4 spirits, his strength had increased by leaps and bounds. Lifting up the pig slaughtering knife with just one hand no longer felt like a struggle to him. Watch out, Grandpa Butcher! Qin Mu wielded the knife with one hand and rushed at Butcher, who was on the wooden pile. Butcher laughed loudly, radiating a heroic aura despite having only half his body. Midnight battle across stormy cities. Qin Mu swung his knife up and down as he moved toward Butcher. The knife flashed faster and faster, creating whistlings of wind. Slow, slow, slow. You are too slow. Butcher started to make a big fuss as his blades became a flurry of metal in front of him. His blades clashed against Qin Mu's, creating a din that sounded like a storm terrorizing pear blossom trees. Faster! Go faster! Your pig slaughtering knife can still go faster. Speed is the essence of midnight battle across stormy cities. The pig slaughtering knife must be as fast as the storm at night, sweeping across all the cities. I want to see you go faster. The continuous flash of knives grew faster, as if 3 silver dragons were writhing up, down, and around the wooden pile. The sound of cutting wind grew louder, and among it, blade energy swirled about. Whenever the blade energy struck the ground, a deep gouge appeared in the earth. Those were marks from their blades. Magnificent! That's the way to do it. The faster your knife is, the more powerful its blade energy will be. However, you still aren't fast enough. You must become so fast that your blade becomes a raging inferno, burning and incinerating all. Butcher continued to swing his knives in a whirlwind of motion, seemingly going into a frenzy. The sight dazzled Qin Mu. Burn, burn, let your knives burn, let your aura burn, and let your spirit burn. Once you've set your knives aflame, that is when you'll know you've completed the divine art. Whoosh! As Butcher continued to unleash a whirlwind of slashes with his knives, the friction between the two of them actually created a spark and set the air on fire. The two knives actually moved back and forth like flaming dragons, creating an awe-inspiring sight. The flame dragons hurtled toward Qin Mu, who was clearly unable to block them. At the last moment, right before they struck him, the flame dragons twisted upward, tearing the darkness of the night sky above disabled elderly village to shreds. Qin Mu stared blankly upwards, a testament to Butcher's terrifying knife-wielding prowess. Soon enough, darkness swarmed back toward the village, devouring every bit of the flame dragons and the blade energy that formed them. The darkness above seemed to be angry at Butcher for raising his knives against them. The pitch black swarmed down toward the village, threatening to devour it whole. However, the stone statues at the four corners of the village suddenly grew brighter, pushing back the darkness. Goddamn sky! Still propped up on the pile of wood, Butcher brandished his knives with both hands as he shouted toward the heavens. I will cleave through this darkness and slaughter my way back someday. My waist was chopped off, not my head. I may have lost my legs, but I'll still slaughter. Grandpa Butcher's gone crazy again. His knives really were too fast though. How long will I have to train to be as fast as him and turn my knife skills into a divine art? Qin Mu gazed at the enraged Butcher in respect. Then he put his pig-slaughtering knife back down and went to look for one-armed old Ma. While Butcher's knife-wielding needs to create flames before being considered a divine art, my fist movements have to create the sound of thunder before qualifying as a divine art. Old Ma clenched his fist, a serious expression on his face as crackling sounds emanated from his bones. Moor, when you are able to hold lightning in your hands, your fists will have achieved the smallest of successes. Butcher's knives are extremely fast, but my fist explodes with unrivaled strength, surpassing the limits of sound and air. One arm can train the fist. One arm can be 1,000 arms. One arm can create the sound of thunder. Boom! Muffled explosions resembling the dull rumble of thunder rang out from Old Ma's fist as he punched the air in front of him. Boom, boom, boom. Qin Mu couldn't tell how fast Old Ma's fist was moving as the one-armed man unleashed a series of punches. With his naked eye, Qin Mu could only see afterimages of Old Ma's fist, making it seem as if he had 1,000 arms instead of just one. Old Ma's fist started to move even faster. Lightning flashed in the palms of all 1,000 of the man's hands, popping and crackling. Thunder accompanied every strike as well, sparks flying in every direction. This is 1,000-armed Buddha of the Thunderclap 8 strikes. As long as your fists are faster than the speed of sound, you'll be able to control the sound of thunder. Every punch and every palm strike of this divine art is capable of destroying the opponent's body and soul, consigning them to eternal damnation, and preventing them from ever reincarnating. Old Ma reined his fist in and solemnly said, Use the Thunderclap 8 strikes I taught you. Attack me. Control both lightning and thunder in your hands as you strike. Qin Mu remained calm. The abilities that Grandpa Ma and Grandpa Butcher taught him today were different than usual. The last time he trained with either of them, both had only taught him the normal knife and fist skills. This time, both brought up the same term, divine art. Since this was his first time coming across the term, Qin Mu was unfamiliar with it. Qin Mu used the Thunderclap 8 strikes to attack Old Ma. Despite having only one arm, he blocked all of Qin Mu's strikes effortlessly. Although Butcher seemed to go into a frenzy when training with Qin Mu, Every clash between the two of them was precisely calculated so that he'd never hurt the boy. Unlike Butcher, Old Ma struck without mercy. Whenever Qin Mu revealed a gap in his defenses, a punch would strike him. Even though the punches weren't heavy, Qin Mu's nose still ended up bloody and swollen. Old Ma only let Qin Mu rest when he couldn't fight any longer. Legs are the wind, the land, and the root of all strength, Cripple said as he leaned on a crutch. Despite the fact that he only had one leg left, Cripple was the one teaching Qin Mu leg techniques. Qin Mu had originally thought that Grandpa Cripple was the most normal person in the village. The old man always smiled warmly and always felt reliable. However, ever since Cripple stabbed the woman that had emerged from the cowskin, with the same warm smile no less, Qin Mu was no longer certain about him. Cripple was good at hiding a dagger behind a smile. No one knew whether that smile was genuine or fake. Cripple smiled at Qin Mu. Butcher praised his knives while Old Ma praised his fists. However, real divine arts lie within one's legs. When you are unable to chop or beat your opponent, what do? You run, of course. Staying alive is what's most important. Life isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Things can go wrong. That's why staying alive can also be considered a victory. As long as you run fast enough, you can sprint on walls, on water, and even through the sky. Everything, even fire or air, becomes a foothold if you run fast enough. The moment you are able to run faster than sound is the moment you will have reached the rudimentary level of leg skill required for divine arts. Come, Moor, put these iron weights on. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 4. Heavenly Devil Creation Technique. Since Grandpa Cripple's leg technique is so fast that he is able to run through the sky, who was it that chopped his leg off? Grandpa Ma's fists are so powerful, but who severed his right arm from his body? And who could have gotten past Grandpa Butcher's knives and cut him in half? Having witnessed the true abilities of Butcher, Old Ma, and Cripple, Qin Mu was both awestruck and confused. Upon completion of his leg training session with Cripple, Qin Mu's body finally finished digesting the energy in the blood of the four spirits, improving his constitution. By that time, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, and he desperately wanted to just lay down and sleep. However, this was only the start of his suffering. Almost every day, the elderly in the village would capture vicious beasts, refine blood of the four spirits from them, and have Qin Mu to drink all of it. Once he did, the insane series of training sessions would commence, tormenting him over and over until he was thoroughly worn out. Besides learning leg, fist, and knife techniques from Cripple, Old Ma, and Butcher respectively, Qin Mu also learned blacksmithing from Mute, painting and calligraphy from Deaf. He even learned how to use echolocation and staff techniques from Blind, all while wearing a blindfold. Whenever Qin Mu became dead tired, Village Chief would call him over and have him practice breathing techniques. The breathing technique that Village Chief taught him was the powerful, specialized Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. Although Qin Mu wasn't aware of how powerful the so-called Overlord Body 3 elixir technique was, the fatigue in his body, which had accumulated over the course of multiple training sessions, would fade whenever he trained with Village Chief. Qin Mu would feel lively and refreshed after a short while, so he considered the breathing technique miraculous. Apothecary's gaze wavered as he waited for Qin Mu to walk away, then spoke up in a soft voice. Village Chief, you only taught him the most ordinary Doween technique, right? That's correct. It's just the Doween technique, Village Chief said, not bothering to deny it. The four great spirit bodies all have techniques of their own. The Green Dragon spirit body uses the chi of the Green Dragon to cultivate, and the White Tiger spirit body uses the chi of the White Tiger to cultivate. The Vermilion Bird and Black Tortoise spirit bodies use chi of the Vermilion Bird and chi of the Black Tortoise to cultivate respectively. However, Qin Mu's body does not contain any of these four vital chi attributes, preventing him from using any of the four great spirit bodies techniques to cultivate. Since he can't cultivate any of the techniques we use, I could only teach him the simplest technique. Even ordinary people can learn the Doween technique and use it to cultivate, as it's the only technique that does not require attributes. This explanation left Apothecary puzzled. But the Doween technique is too simple, too normal. One would certainly be able to become a martial arts practitioner by using it, but they would have fewer accomplishments as a result. I originally thought that as well, village chief said. Then a strange expression appeared on his face. However, I think that we may have been underestimating the Daoyin technique. I have had Qin Mu cultivate with it since childhood, and now his vital qi is extremely formidable. The only way he could unleash its full power, however, is if his vital qi possessed an attribute. Apothecary trembled. Just how formidable is his vital qi? If his vital qi were the same attribute as your green dragon vital qi, Qin Mu's strength would be equal to half the power of your spirit embryo divine treasure. Village chief's words caused Apothecary to jump in shock. I've already broken the celestial being wall and awakened the celestial being divine treasure, he cried. I spent years fully awakening the spirit embryo, 5 elements, and 6 directions divine treasures. Half the power of my spirit embryo divine treasure is equivalent to that of a peak martial arts practitioner. For Qin Mu's strength to be on par with a peak martial arts practitioner without awakening his spirit embryo divine treasure. If he manages to awaken his spirit embryo divine treasure, won't he be several times stronger than if he had one of the 4 great spirit bodies? How is this still the Daoyin technique? Village chief was just as confused as Apothecary was. The Daoyin technique is indeed mysterious. Although it's a simple breathing technique, the foundation it establishes is solid beyond belief. Moore has been cultivating for 10 years, which definitely isn't a short time. The Daoyin technique might have been slow when he first started using it to cultivate, but I've recently noticed that Moore's strength has been increasing by leaps and bounds. His improvement is especially terrifying on days that he consumes the blood of the 4 spirits. If the Daoyin technique weren't so common, I would have thought that it was some godly technique. Both them wore strange expressions. Apothecary let out a ragged breath and shook his head. It's still useless. Regardless of how strong he gets, vital qi devoid of attributes can't unleash much power. How far do you think he'll be able to use the Daoyin technique to cultivate? The look on village chief's face became even stranger. I have no idea. Apothecary nodded in understanding. The Daoyin technique was the most basic technique that children would normally use to build their foundations. Once a child became 10 years old, that foundation would have developed enough to withstand the impacts of spirit blood. After confirming the type of spirit body a child possessed, they would no longer need to cultivate using the Daoyin technique. Better techniques would be available once a person broke any of the walls, so further progress with the Daoyin technique wouldn't be necessary. As for ordinary people who used the Daoyin technique to cultivate, they would never have the chance to drink spirit blood daily as Qin Mu did. Only powerful, influential families would be able to provide such a luxury, but none would waste a huge amount of resources on an ordinary heir. No such family would do what the elderly in disabled elderly village did and constantly catch exceptional spirits beasts just to aid in the cultivation of an ordinary person like Qin Mu. Village chief had never heard of anyone cultivating the Daoyin technique to its maximum potential, let alone to the level that Qin Mu was currently at. As a result, he had no idea what level Qin Mu would be able to reach in the future. What ended up shocking Apothecary and village chief the most was, in the days to come, Qin Mu's cultivation became increasingly profound. The supposedly common Daoyin technique caused an extraordinary change in his body, making his foundation to be extremely solid. In just a month's time, Qin Mu became able to endure consuming even more blood of the 4 spirits, and his vital qi became even denser than it would have been if he had just awakened his spirit embryo divine treasure. However, even though his vital qi was so dense, its lack of attributes prevented him from unleashing any power. This made Qin Mu unable to show the true abilities of his cultivation. Yet the density of his vital qi also came with positive effects. Qin Mu became very good at enduring hits and could also recover extremely fast. He eventually got to a point in his training where he could properly face each of his teachers. He could properly clash with butcher's knives, withstand old ma's fists, trade staff blows with blind while wearing a blindfold, endure leg training with cripple, and finish off the series of training sessions by going to mute the blacksmith and forging iron equipment with a 100-pound hammer. Even with such high-intensity training, Qin Mu only needed to cultivate with the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, inhaling and exhaling accordingly, and he would be completely refreshed. The wondrous effect of the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique left even village chief in shock. He got apothecary to secretly check on Qin Mu's physical condition, find out if there was any hidden damage caused by Qin Mu overworking himself, and prevent it from becoming permanent. After checking on Qin Mu, apothecary returned to village chief with a weird look on his face. I didn't find any hidden damage caused by overwork or exhaustion. In fact, since his vital qi is so dense, it's already starting to improve his constitution. Village chief was stumped. Despite him being extremely knowledgeable, he had never seen a situation like Qin Mu's. To cultivate the most common Daoyin technique to this extent had already surpassed everybody's understanding of the breathing technique. Qin Mu, you will learn to tailor from Granny today. No more fist training. Granny C called out to Qin Mu. The hunchbacked old woman walked over carrying a small basket filled with needles and thread. As her small steps took her out of the village, Qin Mu rushed forward and took the basket from her arm, asking, "Granny, aren't we supposed to learn to tailor in the village? Why are we going outside?" "We are going outside today to teach you how to really tailor and make real clothes." Granny C chuckled. Old Ma, Cripple, and the rest of those old fogies have recently gotten around to teaching you some actual skills. In light of that, Granny can't be stingy. Today, I'll be teaching you what a tailor does best. What a tailor does best. Qin Mu thought in confusion. Doesn't a tailor just make clothes? In spite of his confusion, Qin Mu followed Granny C out of the village and down to the river. Even though Granny C was a hunchback, her footsteps were surprisingly quick. Qin Mu had to make full use of the leg technique that Cripple taught him just to keep up with her. After dozens of miles, they reached an area of grassy knolls at the foot of a mountain. Around 200 paces ahead of them, a herd of elks was grazing and frolicking about. Granny C plucked a silver sewing needle from a ball of thread inside the basket and gave it a flick. The needle disappeared in a flash of light. In the following instant, Qin Mu saw one of the elks collapse to the ground, the other elks fleeing in fear. Granny C moved forward and Qin Mu followed her. As they approached the elk, he realized that it was still alive. However, Granny C's needle had penetrated the space between its brows, somehow preventing it from moving. Take a good look at this, Muer. The needle has pierced the elk's heaven soul. As Granny C had Qin Mu remember the location where the needle protruded from, she took out another needle and stabbed it into the elk's tailbone. "This needle has stabbed into its earth soul," she said. She then took out another sewing needle and stabbed it into the elk's navel. "This needle has pierced the elk's life soul. Aside from these 3 souls, 7 spirits remain. The first spirit called the canine corpse, which is located at the top of the head." Granny C took another silver needle and stabbed it in between the elk's brows near the first needle. The second spirit is called the concealed arrow. The concealed arrow is located at the ajna, a part of the brain. But remember, it's easy to confuse the heaven soul with the concealed arrow. Both needles may seem like they're pierced at the same place, but one is deeper than the other. Do not mix them up. The third spirit, the Qin of Sparrow, is located in Adam's apple, she continued, pointing at Qin Mu's neck. Do you feel a small, triangular indentation when touching your own? That is where the Qin of Sparrow is hidden. This needle will pierce the elk's Qin of Sparrow. Granny C moved quickly, taking out needle after needle and stabbing them into different parts of the elk. The fourth spirit, seizing thief, is located here, in the heart where all blood converges. The fifth spirit, not toxic, is located also in the navel. Do not mistake the life soul for the not toxic. The sixth spirit, remove filth, is located in the perineum, near where one disposes of their waste. The seventh spirit, smelly lung, is located in the lungs, where you cycle between fresh and stale air. Granny C finished stabbing needles into the 3 souls and 7 spirits of the elk and said, "Binding the 3 souls and 7 spirits is the most important step in tailoring proper clothing. It is called soul bind. Do you understand, Muer? Once you do, we begin the tailoring process." Qin Mu didn't understand what did all of this had to do with tailoring, but he still diligently memorized every location by heart, then said, I'm done. Granny C took a pair of scissors from her basket and set about skinning the elk, starting from its lips. Soon, all of the elk skins had been peeled away. Strangely enough, even though the elk had been stripped of its skin, not a single drop of blood flowed from its bare body. I have bounded the elk's soul to its skin, trapping all of its blood, energy, and spirit within. The elk's body may be dead, but it still lives within its skin. However, some techniques still need to be used to truly refine it into proper clothing. Watch closely, Moor. Remember where I point. Without warning, hunchbacked Granny C threw the elk skin into the air. Using her finger in place of a needle, she poked the skin as it arced through the sky. Qin Mu concentrated on committing the scene to memory and saw that Granny C pointed out 316 spots before the elk skin even landed on the ground. Every spot was different, and each strike of her finger carried vital qi that entered the elk skin. When the elk skin landed, it didn't crumple on the floor. Instead, it stood up like a living elk. It shook its head and wagged its tail. One wouldn't be able to tell it was actually just skin. The bizarre sight caused Qin Mu to stare blankly. Granny C chuckled and opened the elk skin, wrapping it around Qin Mu. This is the kind of clothing that we tailors should make. Suddenly, the elk skin began to squeeze Qin Mu. It got tighter and tighter, making him feel as if it were becoming a part of his body, then forced him to fall on all fours. He felt like he had actually become an elk. He could even feel his tiny elk tail. Granny C took a mirror out of her basket and placed in front of him, allowing Qin Mu to look at his own reflection. Upon doing so, he saw that he had really turned into an elk. Qin Mu tried to speak, but he could only let out the bleatings of an elk. Then, out of nowhere, a booming voice rang out. The heavenly devil creation technique. What sorcery! I would never have expected to find a rouge devil teaching a devil brat such sinister techniques in this desolate area of the great ruins. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 5. Li River's Five Elders. A voice containing strong qi echoed throughout the area. Even though the voice came from afar, it felt as if it were right beside them, causing Qin Mu's ears to buzz and vibrate. He looked in the direction that the voice had come from and saw a few figures standing atop a cliff of a mountain about 2 miles away. Qin Mu couldn't see any of their faces clearly but knew that they probably weren't ordinary people since one of them was able to project his voice across such a distance. Devil? Who's a devil? I'm just an ordinary person by the river, and this little elk is just a calf that I'm raising. Granny C slung her basket on her arm and smiled. Then she whispered, Mooer, run. The urgency in Granny C's voice startled Qin Mu. He tried to say something, but couldn't. He didn't want to leave because he was worried that Granny might be in danger. You're just an ordinary person by the river? Projecting your voice to us so clearly, and with such strong qi, no ordinary old woman could do that. An old yet vibrant voice echoed from the cliff, then laughed coldly. There's no way that we, the Li River's 5 elders, could be mistaken about the heavenly devil creation technique. A skill that's constantly changing, stripping the skin to make clothing. You still want to explain when we've clearly seen such a sinister skill. You must have frequently transformed humans into livestock using the heavenly devil creation technique, then drag them to the market for slaughter, huh? Another elder on the cliff solemnly shouted. Many of the seniors of our righteous sect have even been transformed into livestock and forced to graze on grass for eternity. Having seen your methods, there's no way you could trick us. An elk is also a living being. For you to use its skin and soul to create such an evil thing, another elder said in a sorrowful voice. God knows how many more innocent lives will be lost if we don't kill you here and now. Who else should we kill if not you? Granny C spun around to Qin Mu and removed the needle in between his brows, softly saying, These old blokes aren't a threat. However, if you stay by Granny's side, Granny will be distracted trying to protect you, so run quickly. Run back to the village. Qin Mu no longer hesitated and turned back to flee, following the path of the river beside them. He originally thought that it would be awkward to move after turning into an elk, but after he started running, he realized that he had been wrong. Rather than feeling awkward, He felt as if he had always been an elk and ran faster than ever before. The little devil is trying to escape? Won't it be disastrous if we let you escape? Lee River's 5 disciples, it's time for your training. Your target is that elk below us. Eliminate him and bring me his head. At the same time, voices belonging to both girls and boys crisply sounded off. Understood. In a flash, 5 figures jumped off the cliff and ran down its side. Swift as a speeding horse, they reached the bottom of the cliff in an instant. At the bottom of the cliff was a deep pool that served as the stopping point of a raging waterfall that flowed down the mountain. Instead of hitting the water with a splash, however, the 5 of them lightly stepped onto the surface of the water and started running after Qin Mu. Granny C's heart sank. Spirit bodies, and the levels of their spirit embryo divine treasures definitely aren't weak. Muir's speed can't contend with theirs. They'll definitely catch up to him. Just as Granny C was about to move to stop them, 4 figures came flying through the sky and landed around her. Only one person remained atop the cliff of the mountain. He stood there proudly, clearly not coming down anytime soon. What are Lee River's 5 elders doing here in the great ruins? Granny C rolled her eyes and snickered as 4 of the elders surrounded her. Considering how dangerous the great ruins are, aren't you scared that your famous selves might die here? Of the 4 elders around her, the one with the black beard coldly replied, We heard that some filthy disgraces were hiding in the great ruins. Demons and devils that couldn't live outside and came here for refuge. Therefore we, the 5 elders, brought our disciples here to subdue them. It still ain't confirmed who's the devil or the demon, or who'll be subduing who. Granny C held her basket in the crook of one arm and brandished her pair of scissors in her free hand. Looking as if she had bad eyesight, she chuckled. I haven't exercised these old bones for quite some time. Lucky for me, my abilities haven't completely wilted. Could it be that you geezers want me to turn you into clothes? How dare you be so arrogant, you demon? Are you even qualified to be arrogant in front of us? 4 of Lee River's 5 elders shouted. They sprang into motion, staggering their strikes as they attacked Granny C. At the very same moment, Qin Mu, who was desperately running toward disabled elderly village, saw flashes of lightning. Pure white bolts of lightning lit up the area, bathing the foothills and the entire mountain in light several times brighter than the sun. Following the flashes of light, a thunderous rumbling washed over him from behind. Qin Mu turned back for a brief moment to look but only saw waves of wind exploding outward from Granny C's location. The sudden storm lifted the earth, rocks, and even boulders that weighed thousands of pounds, throwing them outward at extremely high speeds. Granny will be fine, Qin Mu said despite his sinking heart, continuing on his way. Suddenly, the sound of wet footsteps rang out from the river beside him. He looked over and saw a young boy and girl dashing across the water. Both were rushing across the surface of the river, yet their bodies didn't sink into the water. The speed at which their feet hit the water, moving up and down, was extremely fast, much faster than Qin Mu could sprint. Before the river's water could even splash against the soles of their feet, the boy and the girl had already moved on, vanishing like the wind. These 2 have already reached the level of riding the waves that Grandpa Cripple said I'm currently unable to reach. They're much stronger than me. The 2 of them soon surpassed Qin Mu while running across the center of the river. Once they did, they angled themselves so they moved toward the riverbank as they ran, clearly planning to intercept him from the front. Qin Mu glanced behind him and saw another person on his tail. To his left, another 2 people were passing between the mountain ridges, their figures leaping up from the dense forest from time to time to run through the treetops. However, they couldn't keep that up for very long and had returned to the ground to catch their breath. In spite of that, they too quickly surpassed Qin Mu and rushed ahead of him. I can't let them cut me off. I need to get ahead of them and reach the village. I need to get Grandpa Ma and the rest to save Granny. Gritting his teeth, Qin Mu avoided the river bank and dashed into the forest. He definitely would have been caught if he continued to run along the bank of the river. The 2 people at the center of the river were way too fast. The 2 dashing through the forest were slightly slower, so going into the forest was his only option. Little devil, You and that elk-murdering she-devil can forget about escaping. As Qin Mu dashed into the forest, one of the two boys in that area sped up and passed the other. However, he was still a step too late and allowed Qin Mu in his elk form to gallop past him. Don't worry, he won't escape. The pair in the lead, the boy and girl who had run atop the river, wore indifferent expressions. With a flip of her sleeves, the girl laughed gently, suddenly increasing her speed and leaping through the treetops as if she were flying. The boy, on the other hand, calmly commanded the other three to chase Qin Mu and outflank him. Regardless of how much Qin Mu frantically sprinted, he couldn't shake the 5 people on his tail. In addition to that, he was forced to run farther and farther away from disabled elderly village, venturing deep into the great ruins. Having lived in disabled elderly village for 14 to 15 years, the farthest he had ever gone from the village was only 3 or 4 miles. Now that he had gone way past that, the surroundings started to become more and more unfamiliar. At the same time, it became progressively desolate without a path in sight. As Qin Mu continued running, a valley came into view up ahead. Amidst the peach blossom trees that populated the valley, he could see a herd of elks. He quickly dashed over to them and blended in. Whoosh! A sweet scent swept through the area as the girl landed on the ground, her sleeves fluttering. Looking at the herd of elks before her, she frowned. Where's the devil brat, senior sister? One of the youths who was around Qin Mu's age asked as they landed one by one. The girl pouted her lips and said, "He is blended into this elk herd. Then let's slaughter all of these elks." The youths rushed into the elk herd, brandishing swords and knives as they mercilessly slaughtered the elks. Even though the elks were fast, they were still slower than the youths. All 5 of them possessed spirit bodies and were decently strong, full-fledged martial arts practitioners. The elks fled in every direction, but it was still impossible for them to escape the bloodbath. Soon enough, the elks were being slaughtered one by one. Suddenly, a human voice resounded from the chaotic herd of elks. "Didn't you say that elks were also living beings?" he asked. "Granny killed a single elk, but all of you are slaughtering an entire herd. Why do you claim that we're the ones following the path of the devil?" "Over there." The girl's eyes sparkled as she gathered her chi and brandished her long sword. Chi of the white tiger spread from her to the long sword, and it radiated a brilliant gold. The sword flew from her hand and shot towards Qin Mu, who was galloping alongside the elk herd. Qin Mu twisted, changing directions to dodge the incoming sword, but it unexpectedly mirrored the change in direction and continued flying towards him. What kind of technique is this? Confusion filled Qin Mu's mind. Could it be a divine art? Doesn't look like it. Grandpa Butcher said that a divine art can only be achieved when one's martial path has been cultivated to the extreme. This girl's martial path is significantly inferior to Grandpa Butcher's. As the sword went in for the kill, Qin Mu changed directions while sticking as close to the ground as possible, barely dodging the attack. The instant he dodged the attack, he caught a glimpse of a fine thread attached to the handle of the sword. One end of the thread was connected to the sword while the other end of the thread was in the girl's hand. This thread was as fine as silk, making it especially difficult to notice. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 6. Dai Youngun. Could she be using this fine thread to control the sword? But, considering how thin the thread is, how can she make the sword change direction? Before he could think about the wondrous thread any further, Qin Mu immediately sprinted away. A moment later, the sword shot past him, stabbing deeply into the trunk of a huge tree with a dull thud. As if the sword were alive, it twitched in the tree trunk, yet couldn't pull itself out. Soon enough, the girl floated over and grabbed onto the treasure sword's hilt, pulling it out in exasperation. My white tiger vital chi still isn't strong enough to control my sword as if it were an extension of my body. Junior Sister Qing, it's already remarkable that you're able to shape your vital chi into a thread and use it to control your sword for battle. The boy who had ran across the river's waves with the girl arrived at her side and gave her a gentle smile. Your experience is lacking, not your cultivation. This is why our masters have brought us to the great ruins, to train and improve upon our shortcomings. In the past, all we cared about was cultivating, so we lack actual combat experience. This little devil is our chance to participate in actual combat. You'll be able to perfectly control your sword with your qi right away. The other 3 youths caught up with the pair, and one of them smiled and said, "The little devil turned into an elk." Since elk are very nimble, he was able to dodge senior sister's flying sword. Senior sister Qin regained her spirit and continued to direct her sword to stab at Qin Mu. She gave lovely laugh and said, "Senior brother Chu, don't attack for now. Leave this little devil for me to train my sword control on." Senior brother Chu was the young boy who had ran across the river with her. He nodded at her words and said, "Come, junior brothers. Let us admire the sword skills of junior sister Qin." Questions swirled within Qin Mu's heart as he dodged the sword chasing him from behind. Controlling a sword with qi? Could it be that the thread in the girl's hand is her vital qi and not an actual length of thread? Vital qi can be used to control a treasure sword to that extent? Will I be able to do that? When he learned to use a pig slaughtering knife, Butcher only taught Qin Mu how to use both his hands to control the knife. Butcher never taught him how to use qi to control the knife, so he knew nothing in that regard. Seeing that female practitioner controlling her sword with her qi, an idea formed in Qin Mu's. Since qi could be used to control a sword, could his vital qi be used to control other things? However, he didn't have time to ponder that question. That senior sister Qin continued to control her sword and have it pursue Qin Mu. In addition to that, since Granny C had turned him into an elk, he found his limbs to be inconvenient. Even the vital qi in his body had become dormant and did not respond like it usually did. Kai! The sword flashed as it struck from behind, grazing Qin Mu's back. He felt a chill run down his back, which was soon followed by the burning sensation of pain. He could tell that senior sister Qin had managed wound his back. This is bad. An elk might be fast, but it's still slower than someone with an actual spirit body. If I get injured again, I'm afraid it'll be difficult for me to escape as an elk. As soon as he finished that thought, he felt his mouth suddenly start to split apart. Yet it wasn't actually his mouth splitting apart, but the elk skin starting to peel away from his body, starting with the mouth. Qin Mu immediately recalled the moment that Granny C had urged him to run. At that time, she had secretly removed a needle that had been protruding from the space between his eyebrows. It was the very needle that had pierced his heaven soul. Soon enough, his head had separated from the elk skin. The sword sliced through the air, slashing toward Qin Mai in an attempt to take his life. Qin Mu leaped forward with all the strength he could muster and freed himself from the elk skin, tumbling several yards ahead before getting to his feet and running. Behind him, the sword controlled by senior sister Qin cut the elk skin to pieces. Its movements were light like a falling petal and as fast as lightning. Pursuing Qin Mu and trying to kill him had apparently improved her sword skill tremendously. Getting free from the elk skin had momentarily delayed Qin Mu's escape, resulting in one of the youths traversing the treetops to land in front of him, cutting off his escape route. Both of them were only about 10 yards away from each other. With this distance, they would run into each other in the very next instant. Qin Mu didn't have the time to change directions. So, without thinking, he subconsciously utilized the leg technique that Cripple taught him. Seeming to stumble forward, Qin Mu moved forward by clawing at the ground with his hands in place of his feet. His legs, which were now in the air, twisted along with the rest of his body, increasing in speed until they resembled a whirlwind. Like a spinning top, he sped toward the youth in front of him. The youth, who was older than Qin Mu by a few years, smiled at him derisively. He raised both of his arms to block, and they radiated a murky green glow as dragon scales began to appear on his skin. "Green dragon's arms," the youth cried. In the next instant, Qin Mu's legs collided with the youth's arms. A metal clank rang out twice, and before the smile could even be wiped from the youth's face, he grunted and lost his balance. Qin Mu's onslaught forced him back. The youth's sleeves were torn to shreds, remnants of the cloth fluttering around like paper butterflies. Dragon claw tattoos could be seen on the skin of both his arms. The claws coiled around them in a lifelike manner, and it was clear that the scales had come from those claws. However, both arms had become red and swollen after taking Qin Mu's legs head-on. "You had iron weights on your legs?" the youth exclaimed, both furious and astonished. Both of his arms trembled with pain. His gaze then landed on Qin Mu's feet. "Even your shoes are made of iron?" Qin Mu got back to his feet and hurried away. Yet, the youth's words reminded him that he still had 2 iron weights strapped to his legs. Since Qin Mu was learning leg techniques, Cripple had requested that he wear iron weights all the time and made him promise to never remove them. As Cripple kept track of his progress, seeing that Qin Mu's body became sturdier and his strength grew over time, the one-legged man saw to it that the iron weights strapped to Qin Mu's calves got heavier and heavier. In addition to that, Cripple also had Mute the blacksmith forge a pair of iron boots for Qin Mu, further increasing the weight. That pair of thick-soled iron boots weighed 5 kilograms altogether, while each iron weight weighed 10 kilograms. A total weight of 25 kilograms was strapped to Qin Mu's legs. Cripple had asked Qin Mu to train until he could no longer feel the burden of the iron weights and boots. Only after that was he allowed to take them off. Qin Mu had only recently gotten used to them, so he hadn't remembered that he was wearing them as he was frantically escaping. However, if he tried to remove them now, he'd definitely be caught. There was no way that he could afford to stop moving. Trample on Mount Meru. As Qin Mu ran, he suddenly gathered strength into his right leg and used the skill, Trample on Mount Meru. The thick sole of his iron boot splattered like mud, shattering the entire boot into flying debris. At the same time, his calf muscles flexed and expanded, bursting out of the iron weight and shooting its remnants into the trees as if they were sharp arrows. Qin Mu stepped forward with his other leg, shattering the other iron boot and weight as his foot landed. Whoosh! Suddenly leaping into the air, Qin Mu felt extremely light. He easily reached a branch at the top of a tree, which frightened him greatly. High up in the tree, barefoot, Qin Mu's weight caused the branch to dip slightly. Sword lights flashed from below and came shooting upwards. Upon looking down, Qin Mu saw the tips of a dozen swords. Senior Sister Qing's sword handling became progressively stronger by the minute. She wasn't controlling a dozen swords. She had created the illusion of a dozen swords with just one. Qin Mu suddenly recalled Cripple's words. "Don't think about whether or not a foothold will be able to withstand your weight. As long as you're fast enough, even water will be like solid ground. Grass, air, everything will become solid ground." Pushing off with the tips of his toes, Qin Mu leaped forward. The sword lights burst into the sky, shredding the top of the huge tree he had perched in. 2 youths leaped up and landed among the treetops just in time to see Qin Mu striding through the tips of the trees, dashing away like a flowing wind. They could only stare blankly, astonished by Qin Mu's speed. "Why is he so fast?" one of them asked. "That kid is younger than us, but his cultivation seems to be slightly stronger ours." As the 2 youths thought about it, they saw their senior brother Chu vanish like smoke and begin to chase Qin Mu at an even faster speed. As expected of senior brother Chu, he's much more powerful than we are, having reached the pinnacle of the spirit embryo. Both of them sighed in admiration. With senior brother Chu personally going after him, there's no way that little devil will be able to escape. At this exact moment, a dark shadow suddenly materialized in the forest. A hairy palm the size of a woven mat came hurtling towards senior brother Chu, slapping him as he dashed through the air. Senior brother Chu flew backward, spinning uncontrollably and crashing to the ground. He tumbled for a short distance before coming to a stop, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he tried to sit up. "Don't go over there. There's a devil ape. That's the territory of a devil ape." The other 4 youths immediately stopped in their tracks. As the shadow emerged from the trees, they saw that it was a huge, terrifying black gorilla. Its eyes were a deep red, and its fangs protruded from its mouth. Beating its chest like a drum, it bellowed, "Die, young-un!" Qin Mu, who had run ahead earlier, had also been struck from the air by this devil ape. He was currently lying at the devil ape's feet, unmoving. The youths couldn't tell if he was dead. Staring at Qin Mu intently, senior sister Qing mumbled, Since one palm strike from that devil ape heavily injured senior brother Chu, and that little devil also received the same hit, he should be dead. Right? Before she could finish speaking, she jumped in surprise. Qin Mu, who was lying on the ground in front of the devil ape, had tilted his head slightly to ascertain the situation. "That kid isn't dead yet?" she said in disbelief. The pitch-black devil ape roared a few times, then stopped when it saw that the rest of the youths didn't dare to step forward. Then it looked down at Qin Mu, slipping his body over with 2 fingers. "Young-un die." Seeing Qin Mu's wide-open eyes, bleeding from his entire face and even the tongue which was sticking out, it was clear he could not be any more dead. Snorting in satisfaction, the devil ape threw Qin Mu's body aside. It then sat down and started picking leaves from a nearby tree, eating them. Even though it's so fierce, the devil ape is actually a herbivore. Qin Mu continued to bleed from his face, keeping his eyes wide open as he slowly crawled away using his elbows. All of a sudden, the devil ape turned its head to look at Qin Mu's body, which had gone limp again. As it continued to glare at Qin Mu's body, it remained motionless. Stretching out its finger and poking what it thought of as a corpse, the ape discovered that Qin Mu's body had already become icy and hard. "Young-un die," it said with renewed satisfaction, then turned back and focused on eating tree leaves without a care. Witnessing all of this from a distance, senior sister Qin could no longer help herself. "Hey, big fella, don't you find it weird that the young-un corpse became so cold and hard so quickly?" Seemingly able to understand her, the devil ape slapped its forehead and immediately turned around. The young-un corpse, however, had already gotten up and started to frantically flee. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 7. Spirit Embryo Wall. The devil ape erupted with fury and started chasing after Qin Mu. However, after a few steps, it realized that its speed was inferior to Qin Mu's because of how large it was. Such a humiliation enraged the devil ape. It uprooted tree after tree, running its hand along the length of one and getting rid of its branches before throwing it like an enormous spear. "Die, young-un!" The bare tree trunk flew through the air at an astonishing speed, clearly carrying an extraordinary amount of force. However, the ape's throw wasn't accurate, so the trunk crashed and landed several yards away from Qin Mu. The devil ape became even angrier and wanted to throw another tree spear, but Qin Mu had run off into the distance. It no longer had a target to vent its anger on, so all it could do was beat its chest repeatedly. Senior brother Chu quietly called out to the other youths. "That devil brat's cultivation is definitely inferior to ours, and his injuries must be worse than mine. There's no way he'll be able to go far." Pushing himself to his feet, he grunted as intense pain racked his chest. He was afraid that many of his ribs had been broken by the devil ape's strike. However, he believed that if Qin Mu could withstand a blow from the devil ape, he could endure it as well. He just hadn't expected Qin Mu to be that strong. Qin Mu's cultivation definitely wasn't weak. His vital qi lacking attributes was the only reason he couldn't display his full potential. Despite his young age, if one were to compare their cultivation, Qin Mu certainly wasn't weaker than any of them, including senior brother Chu. Taking a detour around the devil ape's territory, the youths eventually found Qin Mu's trail again. Just as senior brother Chu said, Qin Mu had been heavily injured by the devil ape as well, having no choice but to reduce his speed to the point that they could catch up. However, as they continued to chase Qin Mu, they discovered that Qin Mu's speed gradually increased as if his injuries were no longer an issue. This little devil must have some miraculous healing medicine. The hearts of all 4 youths sank. Senior brother Chu had consumed medicine that their sect had given him, but it clearly wasn't as effective as Qin Mu's medicine. Seeing how quickly Qin Mu's speed had risen, they inferred that his injuries were definitely healing at a rate visible to the naked eye. This kind of medicine made their eyes and hearts burn with greed. "The medicine in our sect is not of the highest quality. If we manage to catch that devil brat and seize the recipe of that miraculous medicine from him, our masters would definitely be pleased and reward us greatly." However, contrary to what they thought, Qin Mu hadn't consumed any medicine. Instead, he simply inhaled and exhaled as he ran, circulating the so-called Overlord Body 3 elixir technique that the village chief had taught him, the one that he didn't know was actually the most common Daoyin technique. Cultivating with the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique as he ran for his life, Qin Mu made a new discovery. He realized that his vital qi became more active as he ran. The speed of its circulation became even faster as well. This was different from what he had been taught. The Overlord Body 3 elixir technique that the village chief had taught Qin Mu always required him to meditate and control his breathing. Qin Mu had learned to circulate the vital qi and nurture it, using it to condition his body. Over the course of the last 10 years of cultivation, Qin Mu had followed the village chief's instructions on cultivating the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to the letter. Now, however, he had discovered that it was better to run while cultivating the technique. Qin Mu dashed forward as fast as possible, and the circulation of the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique became faster, nurturing and improving both his innate speed and the constitution of his body. In addition to that, wave after wave of vital qi flowed through Qin Mu's organs, limbs, bones, and even the tendons between his muscles and bones, cleansing them over and over again. Qin Mu's ruptured organs and broken bones, which he'd sustained from the devil ape strike, recovered with each cleansing wave of vital qi. Senior brother Chu and the others thought that he was relying on a high-quality medicine, yet never would they expected that was just relying on the unreliable Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. Qin Mu eventually realized that his vital qi couldn't reach a certain part of his body, the space right between his eyebrows. Between his eyebrows was space the width of a finger. Vital qi could not reach this space. Although his vital qi could pass under his scalp and wash over his skull, cleansing and strengthening both of them, it would come to a stop every time it reached the center of his brow. It was as if there were an invisible wall there, blocking his vital qi from passing through. Whenever he directed his vital qi to rush the wall, something even stranger occurred. Qin Mu could hear a mysterious voice. This voice sounded as if it were coming from high in the sky, as distant as the 9 heavens above. It sounded melodious and divine, resonating like the voice of a god passing down a heavenly decree. Every time this voice resounded, Qin Mu's vital qi would retreat like an uncontrollable tide and ignore the space between his eyebrows. Could this be the spirit embryo wall? Qin Mu said inadvertently. Qin Mu was confused. Village chief and the other inhabitants of disabled elderly village had explained walls and wall breaking to him. Walls were the things sealing the treasures in warrior's body, while wall break was to break the seal and attain the treasure inside. However, they hadn't told him which part of the body the spirit embryo wall was or how to break open the spirit embryo wall. What Qin Mu didn't know was, it wasn't that village chief and the others didn't want to tell him any of this. There actually weren't any techniques for specifically breaking through the spirit embryo wall in the entire world. A person with an ordinary human body and a person with a spirit body was on 2 intrinsically different levels. A person with a spirit body will have been born with an innately unsealed spirit embryo wall, putting them in a class above everyone else. The spirit embryo wall of an ordinary person, on the other hand, would be sealed off, relegating them to a lower class. People with spirit bodies were aloof, remote, and rarely cared about the needs of the ordinary people. Although martial practitioners still emerged from among ordinary people, village chief and the others had never heard of any of them unsealing their spirit embryo wall. As a result, they didn't know how a normal human would break through it. As vital qi rushed at the invisible wall located at the center of his eyebrows, Qin Mu continued on his frantic escape. Every time the mysterious voice rang out, his vital qi would automatically recoil from the wall. Even though he currently wasn't able to break through the wall, Qin Mu was patient and believed that he would succeed eventually. Qin Mu didn't plan on revealing this discovery regarding the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to the elderly of the village. He decided that he would surprise them after succeeding in breaking through the spirit embryo wall. It was just hard to tell whether it would be more of a surprise to them, or more of a shock. As senior brother Chu and the 4 other youths continued to chase Qin Mu, they grew progressively more worried. The little devil ahead of them hadn't just recovered from his injuries. His speed had increased even more. Now that was terrifying. It meant that, even as Qin Mu ran for his life, his cultivation was also improving. Although his increase in speed was slow and gradual, it was still terrifying. Cultivating had a set of rules that anyone and everyone needed to follow. Even when one succeeded in breaking through, any progress in their cultivation needed to occur slowly, over time, not all at once. Everyone had to cultivate for several days or even months, just to bring about the smallest improvement in their cultivation. In spite of these universal rules, they could clearly feel the cultivation of this little devil constantly getting stronger. It terrified them. Luckily, Qin Mu was originally inferior to the 5 youths. Even though his cultivation was currently improving, there was still a gap between them and him. However, catching up to him would be no easy feat for them. Since he had suffered at the hands of the devil ape, Qin Mu had become much more careful and would make sure to avoid the territories of the strange beasts. Whenever Apothecary brought Qin Mu out to gather herbs, he would tell him that strange beasts were very intelligent, that each of them had their own territory and would leave signs to indicate that. Those signs would include things like a tree stripped of its bark, bones buried in the ground, beast skulls on wooden stakes, or traces of urine. As long as one saw such signs, they would be able to just avoid the beasts. When Qin Mu had encountered the devil ape, there had been a mark of a gargantuan fist indicating the area was its territory. Qin Mu had accidentally rushed into its territory because he had missed that sign. Since he was now being more careful, he wouldn't make the same mistake. However, even he didn't accidentally trespass on a strange beast's territory. Many would still venture out of them to search for food, filling the great ruins with danger. Qin Mu eventually found his way to a swamp where he saw 2 strange beasts having a territorial dispute. The beasts battling each other were a coxcomb snakeneck snow condor and a poisonous swamp dragon python. The former created gale winds with a sweep of its wings, its huge body soaring through the air. The latter writhed through the swamp below, causing havoc and destruction with its long body. Before Qin Mu could even enter the swamp, the hurricane of force caused by the 2 giant creatures swept him away. Upon landing, he came face to face with a herd of startled bison that almost trampled him to death. I keep getting farther and farther from the village. The realization made Qin Mu's heart sink. The 5 people behind him were still chasing relentlessly, making it impossible for him to return to the village. However, even more frightening than that was the fact that the sun would be setting soon. Qin Mu and Granny C had left the village right after noon. Now that the sun would start to set, darkness would soon fall. If he couldn't make it back to the village before that happened, he would face great danger. The sky's getting dark, Senior Brother Chu. In the distance behind Qin Mu, Senior Brother Chu and his companions had also noticed the setting sun. The youth that Qin Mu had kicked away wore an uneasy expression. Master said that the great ruins were cursed, that they would become a forbidden region when the sky went dark. We need to get back to the village, which has the protection of the stone statues. Otherwise, the only path left is death. Senior Brother Chu shook his head. It's too late to turn back now. As far as we've gone, we won't be able to return to village before nightfall. The darkness is as dangerous to the devil brat as it is to us. We have no choice but to see where the little devil is going to hide. Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 8. Granny's Skin. Granny once said that, if I got lost in the great ruins and couldn't return to the village, I shouldn't panic. Qin Mu thought to himself calmly. There are many remnants of civilization in the great ruins. If I can find one to hide in, I might be able to survive. 2 conditions need to be met for a remnant to be considered safe. First, it has to have stone statues similar to the ones in the village. Second, I need to check if there are a large amount of strange beasts in the remnant. Most are intelligent, so they'd know where to go to escape the darkness. Many remnants of civilization existed in the great ruins. Qin Mu had passed by traces of abandoned cities and villages earlier on. Considering their crumbling fences and dilapidated walls, they were extremely ancient. However, he hadn't had time to stop and check if they had stone statues. All of a sudden, the entire world went eerily silent, so quiet that it could drive a person insane. The setting sun had already reached the horizon, only half of it visible. Immediately after silence fell upon the great ruins, The beating of wings could be heard. Looking up, Qin Mu saw a huge flock of giant birds flying overhead, forming a dense cluster in the sky. Then the ground began to tremble, and the forest around him began to fall apart. One by one, strange beasts split the earth, emerging from tunnels they had been digging and began to scramble frantically. Qin Mu even heard water erupt from the swamp, looking over to see a few scarlet fish several yards in length leaping from the water's surface and using their fins to flee on land as if they were legs. The sight confused Qin Mu. Were fish still considered fish if they could sprint on land? All of these strange beasts are heading the same direction. I'll definitely be able to hide from the darkness there. Spirits high, Qin Mu dashed alongside the beasts. As the sky grew dimmer and dimmer, the darkness in the distance came swarming in like a tidal wave. That darkness was nothing like a simple transition between day and night. It resembled a huge flood, engulfing every mountain, valley, and all of the wilderness it came across. Even though it wasn't his first time seeing the darkness overtake the land, Qin Mu still considered it an extremely stunning sight. The darkness flooded towards Qin Mu and the herd of strange beasts like a torrential downpour, yet all of the animals continued to furiously charge in its direction. Qin Mu hesitated for a moment. Was there really a safe place ahead in which he could take shelter from the darkness? Wouldn't he suffer a tragic end if that weren't the case? The darkness is fast approaching. Even if I turned back now, I wouldn't be able to make it to the village. I'd never be able to outrun the darkness. Gritting his teeth, he desperately rushed forward. No use worrying. I can only continue running with the beasts. 3 miles down the river that ran by disabled elderly village, the battle between Granny C and the Lee River's 5 elders had reached a breaking point. Originally, only 4 elders had been attacking Granny C. However, since they hadn't been able to promptly take her down, the 5th elder who had been watching the battle from the cliff, Qi Yanbing, joined the fray. Adding him to their onslaught, they set up their 5 elements devil-purifying trigram. Up to this point, Granny C had only been able to just barely fend off the attacks of the 4 elders. However, her strength surprisingly increased when Qi Yanbing added to their efforts. Even their 5-element devil-purifying trigram could not trap this old woman. This realization startled the 5 elders, and they soon grew frustrated. Only now did they figure out that this old woman wanted to take care of them all at once. To that end, she had pretended to be weak, intent on luring Qi Yanbing into the battle and prevent him from escaping. Light on her feet, Granny C flickered through the area like a phantom. The silver needles from her basket moved as if they had minds of their own, instantly covering the Lee River's 5 elders in wounds. Threads that had been attached to the needles were now running through the 5 elders, binding their souls and bodies and preventing them from moving. Granny C walked towards them, scissors in hand and a bright smile on her face. Granny Me hasn't treated human skin for a long time. I wonder if my skills have gotten rusty. As soon as she came to stand in front of Qi Yanbing, he suddenly opened his mouth. A silver pellet shot from his mouth and streaked towards Granny C's face. The moment the silver pellet came into contact with the air, it grew in size. The pellet instantly became 100 times larger, expanding into a sphere made of 10,000 pure sword lights. This sudden change caught Granny C off guard, and she immediately moved backward in retreat. Her body went bizarrely limp, and like an earthworm squirming through the air, she dodged the sword lights. At the same time, she threw out the scissors in her hand. Like 2 silver dragons, the scissors flashed through the air, cutting and snipping at the sword lights. As nimble as she was, Granny C had still been caught off guard. One of the myriad sword lights had managed to strike her from behind, and since she was a hunchback, the sword light had essentially found her blind spot. Soon enough, the sword lights that had filled the sky vanished as pieces of broken swords came crashing to the ground, covering several acres of the area. The silver pellet that the sword lights came from returned to its original, diminutive size and fell to the ground with a crack. Granny C returned to the ground as well, pulling the sword out of her back with a frown. "You still dodged it," croaked Qi Yanbi, the leader of the 5 elders. Despair filled his face as he cried, 6,842 swords were hidden inside that silver pellet. Yet, at such a close range, you still managed to dodge them. You definitely aren't an ordinary figure among the devils. But an old woman like you has never been seen among their number. Just who are you? The second he asked that question, he noticed something strange about Granny C's back. Although her hunchback did have a wound that the sword caused, there wasn't any blood flowing from it. Instead, light shined on it, revealing that the inside was hollow. This isn't your true appearance. The realization made Qi Yanbing's hair stand on end. You're wearing someone else's skin. You tore my skin. Granny C frowned. The voice that came from her mouth didn't sound like that of an old woman. Instead, it sounded soft and sweet. Whoever heard that voice would think that its owner was a gorgeous lady in her prime, not someone with one foot in the grave. Ah, the air is leaking, Granny C muttered, sighing as she pressed a hand to her throat. Taking out a needle and thread from her basket, she sewed the tear on her back and tested out her voice, which then returned to normal. But the strange voice had long since provoked a drastic change in Qi Yanbing. He looked as if he had seen a ghost. I've heard that voice before, he said, trembling. I know who you are. You're that woman, the heavenly devil cult Ms. As Qi Yanbing spoke, Granny C's expression changed slightly. She tugged at the thread binding all of them together, and right before he could finish his sentence, the Li River's 5 elders were sliced to pieces. Their gory remains fell to the ground with a wet thud. Surprisingly enough, the thread wasn't stained with blood after that. Then, as if it were alive, it coiled back into a ball and returned to the basket on its own. Granny C snorted in derision, then chuckled to herself. How long have you been there, you damned cripple? A short distance behind her, Cripple hobbled over using his crutch for support, a wide grin on his face. I only just got here, dear sister. I didn't see or hear anything. Granny C glanced at him, then gave him a bright smile. As long as you didn't hear anything, seeing is fine. Let us return to the village. Instead of immediately agreeing, Cripple hesitated. For his entire life, Sect Master Li Tianxing of the Heavenly Devil Cult was revered as wise and powerful. In spite of that, in his later years he made its stupid, pitiable mistake. He suddenly fancied one of the prettiest demonesses of the younger generation. He disposed of his original wife and took the young demoness as his new one, throwing the Heavenly Devil Cult into an uproar, Cripple said, calmly reciting the story from memory. However, during their first night as husband and wife, just as they were about to consummate their marriage, Li Tianxing's new wife assassinated him and stole the Heavenly Devil Cult's Devil Bible. Every single elder of the Heavenly Devil Cult came out of closed cultivation to pursue her, yet she still managed to escape. Such a thing happened? Granny C asked innocently. Even now, no sign of her has been found, Cripple replied. Well, in the good old days, this old woman heard tell of a man who had trained his legs to a godly level. He reached a point where people referred to his legs as divine legs. Nobody in the world could match his speed, Granny C said with a laugh. However, that man realized he could use his godly speed to steal. The act excited him, and he grew addicted to it, eventually making a name for himself as the world's greatest thief god who could never be caught. Since he wasn't a god, his title, which had God in it, angered those who were. As if it were decreed by the gods, when the man went to Eternal Peace Empire to steal the disc of the Emperor, he was discovered by the Imperial P. Although he lost a leg in the ensuing battle, the man still managed to escape from the Imperial Preceptor, taking the disc of the Emperor and disappearing without a trace. Despite his reputation as number 1 man below the gods, the Imperial Preceptor wasn't able to catch the thief god. In fact, he probably still has one of the thief god's divine legs and is still waiting to return it to its rightful owner. Granny C stared at Cripple thoughtfully, and the two shared a laugh. Granny, we're all disabled people from the same village, Cripple said, his grin growing wider and wider. We have our own secrets and made a promise to not ask about another person's history. From now on, I am also deaf and mute, he swore. I won't say a word. Granny C snorted once more, then started walking towards the village, basket in tow. "Did Moore tell you what happened and ask you to come for me?" Cripple shook his head. "You and those 5 old men caused such a commotion. All of us could sense residual waves of your battle from the village, so the village chief sent me to check on you." The expression on Granny C's face changed, and she anxiously asked, "Has Moore returned to the village? I didn't see him on the way here. This is bad." The two of them rushed back to disabled elderly village, and even before they got there, the sun finished setting as darkness rose on the horizon. It climbed higher and higher into the sky, spreading across the horizon and enveloping everything in its path like a raging tidal wave. Granny C ran through the village, searching high and low for Qin Mu. "Moore isn't back yet?" she asked frantically. Then the darkness engulfed disabled elderly village. "There's no need to worry, Granny." Sitting on a stretcher that Cripple and Apothecary were carrying out, Village Chief stopped Granny C from taking a stone statue to look for Qin Mu. In a reassuring voice he said, "We've taught him everything he needs to know. As long as he had learned them, Qin Mu should be able to survive in the Great Ruins. The sky has already gone dark, so it's pointless for you to go out now." The village chief's words devastated Granny C, but she knew he was telling the truth. The darkness had already overwhelmed the Great Ruins. As long as Qin Mu was still alive, he wouldn't need her to save him. He'd be able to survive the night. If he were dead, then there would be no point in her carrying the stone statue outside to find him. "He still has that jade pendant with him," Granny C thought to herself. However, even though the pendant on Qin Mu's chest came to mind, she knew that it had a limited range of protection meant for protecting a small baby. Since Qin Mu had grown up, the jade pendant's protective glow was only large enough to cover his chest. "Be smart, Moore," Granny C muttered. "You'll definitely survive." Tales of Herding Gods. Chapter 9. Pink Skeletons. As he ran with the herd of strange beasts, Qin Mu saw that the land ahead of them suddenly sloped downwards into a valley. Ancient, untouched structures were strewn throughout the village, such as ruined palaces, an enormous plaza, and even majestic skyscrapers. "So there really was remnant of civilization ahead of us," Qin Mu exclaimed. At the very front of these decaying ruins was a towering gate that spanned the entrance to the valley. Marble pillars made up the bulk of this gate, dragons sculpted into the marble of each one so that they appeared to coil upward. The herd of strange beasts turned towards the gate, rushing toward the ruins. Qin Mu inadvertently glanced upwards, and his scalp went numb. The darkness was flowing down into the valley like a wave of ink. "It's here," he screamed internally. The darkness would soon reach the gate to the ruins and engulf it. As if they could sense this as well, the strange beasts running alongside Qin Mu grew frantic. They rushed the gate with even more ferocity than before, ramming into and crushing other more careless beasts to death. Now definitely wasn't the time to be calm and orderly. If they couldn't reach the ruins in front of them before the darkness arrived, they would die horrible deaths. Sprinting forward madly, Qin Mu grabbed onto a behemoth's tail. Unaware of the human hitching a ride on it, the behemoth bolted forward like a majestic black mountain, pushing aside and trampling all of the other beasts in its path. Some of the beasts that the behemoth left in its wake leaped forward and latched onto its tail as well, allowing it to bring them into the ruins. As he gripped the behemoth's tail, Qin Mu looked below him and saw that all of the strange beasts that had been ferocious during the day were now trembling in fear. They clung to the behemoth's tail for their very lives. When he turned to look farther behind them, he also saw the 5 youths frantically chasing the behemoth, scrambling for the ruins. Finally, just before the darkness engulfed the gate, the behemoth burst through it, rushing into the ruins like a gust of wind. At that same exact moment, the 5 Lee River's disciples rushed in through the gate as well. However, of the 5 youths, only 3 of them managed to make it all the way through before the darkness engulfed it. Senior brother Chu, senior sister Qing, and 1 other youth made it through, but the other 2 disciples were a hair too late. Between the 2, one only managed to get an arm through the gate. The other only got the front half of his body through. The back half had been claimed by the darkness. As senior brother Chu passed through the gate, He immediately tried to grab onto his two junior brothers. Taking hold of the visible arm, he forcefully pulled it towards him, causing a horrifying white skeleton to emerge from the darkness. Before senior brother Chu could even reach for the other youth, he collapsed to the ground. The blood of the surviving disciples ran cold. Flesh, blood, and clothing still covered the front half of the youth, but all of the other half of his body had been stripped down to the bone, devoured by some unknown thing in the darkness. Why does this darkness exist? Senior sister Qing screamed. What lurks inside of it? Senior brother Chu struggled to stay composed, then released a trembling breath. Death is like a lamp going out. Our two junior brothers were brave and heroic. They died trying to vanquish a devil, he solemnly said. That devil brat purposely came to these ruins at the last possible minute to take advantage of the darkness and use it to kill us. He's somewhere in these ruins. He won't be able to escape us with the darkness everywhere, said the youth who survived. Ruthless fury could be heard in his voice, a clear indication of how much the deaths of his fellow disciples affected him. Let's find him. We'll avenge our junior brothers by chopping that devil brat into 1,000 pieces. He's over there, senior sister Qing exclaimed, seeing Qin Mu jump from the tail of the behemoth. You still have the audacity to try and escape after causing the deaths of 2 of my junior brothers. Little devil? Her accusations annoyed Qin Mu. You were the ones who chased me for no reason. How are their deaths my fault when it was you who decided to relentlessly chase me until nightfall? I didn't provoke you in any way, yet you pursued me with the intent of taking my life. Aren't I the one who's innocent here? Senior sister Qing gritted her teeth. How dare you try to argue with me, you little devil? You're the devil, Qin Mu yelled, flying into a rage. Granny and I only killed an elk to make clothing, and you called us devils. You guys killed an entire herd of them, yet you still dare to say we're the devils in this situation. A dark expression appeared on senior brother Chu's face, and he stepped forwards. The little devil is skilled at stirring up the doubt in our hearts. We don't need to waste time talking. We just need to kill him. As soon as he said this, the 3 of them prepared to attack. However, the moment they did, a low growl resounded throughout the ruins. They looked around to find out where it came from, and what they saw instilled shock in their hearts. Gathered throughout the ruins were hundreds of thousands of strange beasts. There were even plenty of beasts that were powerful enough to have their own territories. Every single beast looked down at the 3 remaining disciples maliciously, an ominous glint in all of their eyes. Realizing that something was wrong, senior brother Chu retreated backward a step. Taking this as an indication that they weren't going to attack, the surrounding beasts went quiet. Qin Mu watched this scene in awe. During the day, the strange beasts of the great ruins normally fought over territory and hunted for prey. However, when night came, all of them existed in harmony with one another. It was a bizarre sight. Could these strange beasts have established a rule prohibiting conflict within this remnant of civilization? Qin Mu blinked as the thought occurred to him. Many of the beasts here were natural enemies, yet they left each other alone in these ruins, confirming Qin Mu's hypothesis. The villagers had always told him that strange beasts were intelligent. Considering the fact that the devil ape from earlier was capable of speech, constantly saying "young-un" or "die," the possibility of them creating such a rule was likely. Senior brother Chu reached the same conclusion as Qin Mu and released a sigh of relief, whispering, "Let's not make a move tonight. Once the sun rises, we'll kill him." Senior sister Qing and the other youth nodded in agreement. After taking a good look at his surroundings, Qin Mu saw that the ruins were extremely spacious, like a city within the valley. There were strange beasts everywhere within the ruins, everywhere except the plaza. Hundreds of human skeletons filled the plaza. All of them wore luxurious clothes, and the manner in which they had died couldn't be easily ascertained. However, as he approached the plaza, Qin Mu was able to determine one thing. All of these people were female. The weird thing was, the women had been sitting cross-legged in an orderly fashion when they died. There were 15 rows of skeletons, and each row had 15 skeletons. It seemed as if they had been in the middle of meditating when a disaster struck, killing them so quickly that they didn't even have a chance to try and escape. Arriving at the front of the plaza, Qin Mu carefully examined the area and discovered that a skeleton sat in the front of the first row, clearly signifying that they had a leader. All of the skeletons, including the leader, were facing the same direction. They were oriented towards the towering gate in the distance. "Senior brother, look!" Senior sister Qing's eyes gleamed as she pointed at the skeletons in the plaza. "There are precious artifacts in the hands of those skeletons. Every skeleton has one." Senior brother Qi looked in the direction she was indicating, and his heart started pumping with excitement. Each skeleton held various artifacts, including treasure swords, horsetail whisks, jade pendants, priceless vases, and all kinds of other weapons. These precious artifacts glowed brilliantly as if they had just been forged. All of them were clearly extraordinary treasures. The most eye-catching artifact among them was a pearl floating just above the palm of the leader skeleton. A hazy mist seemed to be swirling inside of that pearl. This plaza was actually an enormous treasure vault. "If we could get our hands on those treasures," Senior Sister Qing whispered, her breathing becoming ragged. Even the treasure vault of Li River's 5 elders didn't contain a fraction of the wealth in this plaza. If the 3 of them could acquire these treasures, they would be able to start their own sect if they wanted to. Senior Brother Chu's gaze flickered and he laughed. "The heavens have decided to treat us well. 5th junior brother, go bring those precious artifacts back here." The youth did as he was told and entered the plaza. The moment he did, however, he saw the hairs of a horsetail whisk flutter gently. They suddenly started to slowly grow in length, and one strand moved towards him as if it were alive. That strand of horsehair resembled an extremely thin spirit snake as it lifted its tip to examine the youth. "Senior Brother Chu." The youth's voice trembled as he called out to his senior, not daring to turn his head away. "The owners of those precious artifacts are dead," Senior Brother Chu said solemnly. "Don't worry, 5th junior bro." Before Senior Brother Chu could even finish his sentence, the strand of hair shot forwards like lightning and penetrated the eye of his 5th junior brother. The other strands of hair came flying over as well, digging into both of the boy's eyes. The youth opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. From his position nearby, Qin Mu watched as the youth's body quickly shriveled up, instantly becoming a desiccated corpse. The horsetail whisk didn't stop there and instead continued to coil around the youth. Soon enough, even the skin and bones of the corpse melted away, leaving just a set of clothes and a pair of shoes on the ground. Tales of Hurting Gods. Chapter 10. Invasion of Darkness. Sweat rolled down the forehead of Senior Brother Chu as he croaked. "No wonder no one has taken those precious artifacts. Junior Sister Qing, each of them has a mind of their own. They'll harm anyone that isn't their master." A chill went down Senior Sister Qing's spine as she continuously nodded her head in understanding. "These artifacts have always been here," Qin Mu shouted coldly. "No one's taken them, not even the strange beasts, which clearly meant that they're dangerous. You already knew that, yet you still used your junior brother to test the waters. With a heart as vicious as yours, you're the real devil here. The devil has come to provoke doubt within us again," Senior Brother Chu said with a shake of his head, an expression of deep sorrow on his face. "What do you know about the relationship between me and my junior brother? A little devil will forever be a little devil. You consider my heart similar to your devil heart, so of course you'd think I was as sinister as you. I shall no longer argue with you. When tomorrow comes, I'll be sending you on your way." Qin Mu frowned. This Senior Brother Chu was indeed treacherous and ruthless. If he could exploit his junior brother's life, he definitely wouldn't let Qin Mu leave these ruins alive. Unfortunately for Qin Mu, this Senior Brother Chu was extremely strong. Qin Mu couldn't possibly beat him, not to mention the fact that he had the powerful Senior Sister Qing by his side as well. Suddenly, the earth began to shake, causing the ruins to shake as well. The strange beasts started to howl as they recoiled into the positions they had claimed throughout the area. All of them looked at the gate at the front of the ruins, their expression full of anxiety and fear. What are these strange beasts afraid of? The moment that question popped into his head, the incredibly dense darkness suddenly surged towards the gate like a flood. Qin Mu stumbled backward in shock. However, he realized that something like an invisible barrier covered the gate, blocking the darkness. The darkness frantically pounded into the barrier, trying to break through. The barrier warped and distorted as the darkness kept pounding into it, but it did not shatter. The darkness distorted with the barrier, sometimes shaped like razor-sharp claws, while at other times it resembled wisps of smoke or countless sharp spikes. It was ever-changing. Then, all of a sudden, the relentless pound of the darkness against the barrier stopped. Silence reigned. After some time, the barrier that had been warped and distorted stretched. The darkness pushed against the barrier until it formed an indentation shaped like a face. It was extremely huge, with its forehead taking up the sky of the valley and its chin pressing against the ground. All of the strange beasts in the ruins cowered low to the ground. They didn't dare to move, not even the slightest bit. They also didn't dare to look directly at the face of darkness. The face had 3 pitch-black eyeballs. Upon looking at them, Qin Mu's entire body went cold as if his soul were about to be sucked away by the darkness. Words abruptly streamed from the face of darkness. Chikaduo, Samoyi. Bo-ri Samoyi. Chikaduo Bo-ri Samoyi. It said in an unknown language in its deep, vibrating voice. The voice vibrated because it sounded as if multiple voices had been mixed together to form it. A bizarre force emanated from the voice, causing the earth in the ruins to constantly shake. The cracks and other signs of decay on the palaces and pillars scattered throughout the valley grew larger and larger, forcing many of them to collapse from the shaking. When debris started to fall from the gate from the trembling, it was obvious it was not going to withstand any longer. However, at that very moment, a bright light shone from the plaza. The luminescent pearl that floated above in the skeleton leader's hand began to emit an increasingly bright light. Noticing the light shining from behind him, Qin Mu immediately turned around only to see the pearl rise into the sky. The light that shone from it was a variety of different, intense colors. The intense, multicolored light shone down on the hundreds of skeletons. Every single skeleton that the light washed over suddenly came to life. Qin Mu gaped at the sight. To him, the skeletons bathed in light no longer looked like skeletons. They looked like beautiful, flesh and blood maidens with rosy pink lips and bright, fiery clothes. These maidens sat in the plaza exactly where the skeletons had been. Their leader, who was also female, had been holding onto the luminescent pearl that was now slowly rising into the air. Just like the face of darkness, the maidens started to chant in a bizarre language that was just as incomprehensible. Ipashio Parase Ninjun He 11. Guanming Duanjing Wu Si Jiangyu. Their voices softly rang out in unison. The voice of the darkness gradually became louder, intensifying the tremors throughout the valley. As the darkness all around the ruins invaded from every direction, the voices of the maidens became clearer and more powerful. The luminescent pearl hovering in the air then released wave after wave of light that shone into the darkness, dispersing it like smoke. The voice of the darkness and the combined voices of the maidens resembled gods and devils engaging in a verbal duel, each side constantly gaining the upper hand and then losing it. At the same time, the darkness and light visibly clashed with each other. This unimaginable battle overwhelmed Qin Mu's mind. Despite the fact that he lived in the great ruins, this was the first time he had seen such an extraordinary sight. This voice, he whispered, a stunning realization washing over him. The combined voice of the maidens reminded him of the god voice he had heard when he tried to break the spirit embryo wall. Both had the same inherent grace in them. He could vaguely feel that the words of the two voices were different, but they had the same general feel. Whenever he tried to break the spirit embryo wall with his vital qi, Qin Mu could hear an indistinct, divine voice solemnly echo from the 9 heavens above. Every time the voice rang out, his vital qi would uncontrollably retreat from the spirit embryo wall, unable to break it. At this point, the two voices were still in the midst of their heated battle. Both were powerful in their own ways, and neither one was able to keep the upper hand for long. The devil voice that resonated from the darkness was strong and terrifying, while the collective voice of the maidens was divine, melodious, and persistent. Every time the devil voice seemed as if it were about to permanently seize the advantage, the maidens always managed to overcome it by deciphering its chant. On the other hand, the devil voice would always make a comeback after losing the advantage, retreating and then erupting like a wild, majestic flood. Both voices were unique in their own ways. Qin Mu became engrossed in their constant struggle as he listened to the collective voice of the maidens when an idea suddenly popped into his head. The devil voice is fighting the God voice. This God voice is very similar to the one keeping me from breaking the wall. Maybe I can use the devil voice to counter that voice. Qin Mu was absolutely convinced that this was a good idea, growing more and more excited because of it. As long as he learned the words that the devil voice was chanting, he could then say them the moment the God voice resounded in his head. Doing so would counter the voice from the 9 heavens above and allow his vital qi to break the spirit embryo wall. As long as he could break his spirit embryo wall, with his Overlord Body and Overlord Body 3 elixir technique, he wouldn't need to be afraid of Senior Brother Chu and Senior Sister Qing. However, once his thoughts got that far, he suddenly froze as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over him. If the voice in his head were actually the voice of a god from the 9 heavens above, and he used words spoken by the voice of a devil to counter it, would that mean he was a devil that had been sealed by the gods? Could it be that Senior Brother Chu and the rest of them had been right all along? Was he truly a little devil? And no! Qin Mu shook his head. If he were a devil, wouldn't his overlord body be devilish as well? If that were the case, why did everyone in the village call it an overlord body? Wouldn't the name devil body be more accurate? Who cares if my body is a devil body or an overlord body? First, I need to break the spirit embryo wall. Idea firm in his mind, Qin Mu got to work. He started by perfectly memorizing the syllables of the words that the voice in the darkness was chanting, as well as the tone and manner in which it said them. Once he was sure that he had all of it right, Qin Mu then used the Overlord Body 3 elixir technique to circulate his vital qi. As he pushed his vital qi towards his spirit embryo wall, which was located right between his eyebrows, he chanted the foreign words of the devil voice.